Hello and welcome everyone. This is Type V3 with the Transformers Generations review of the Deluxe class Windblade, the final result of Hasbro's fan-built bot promotion in celebration of the franchise's thrilling 30th anniversary. Windblade's entire concept was dictated by thousands of Transformers fans through a series of votes, and in the end, the majority decision produced a black and red female jet. And that's the toy you see before you. I think the alt mode looks quite good, the general design is sleek, and the silhouette of the plane is great. Personally, I find the cockpit section to be oversized, though the rest of the proportions are solid. There's plenty of panel lines and small rivet detailing too. A clear yellow cockpit and rubber nose cone round out the rest of the highlights. For paint apps, there's not much to be found. It's just the pearly white turbines and the black parts on the red area of the jet. What this figure does have in abundance is a lot of bare black plastic, and if I'm honest, the finish comes off a bit recycled. Don't expect to find that glossy new toy gleam here. In terms of major disappointments, well, there's no getting around this one. There's a giant hole in the fuselage. I don't find it too distracting, but I also wouldn't defend this design decision either. The profile of the jet carries the same issue. The silhouette is nice and clean, with the innards appearing both cluttered and disjointed. Finally, the underside of the jet is quite a mess too. However, there are far worse examples. In terms of features, Windblade has a deployable front landing gear, which you can tuck away if you don't like. Fortunately, the backsides are just stationary. They're just kind of molded that way, so you can't really hide them. These VTOLs can be positioned forward in the event you like that look better. Personally, it's not for me, but it's there for you. And as for the plastic quality, or just the tolerances of this alt mode, it's a bit weak, and it's a bit unfortunate. I mean, her biggest problem is that because there's this hole here, there is no structural support in the middle of the entire plane, so it tends to just flex in and out. I mean, if you move the tail, you can tell the wings start to disassemble and break. I mean, if there was just some way that they could have connected these two sections together, that would have been awesome. And as for the existing tabs, they're not that strong themselves. I mean, these ones always like to pop off. The biggest problem is if she's just sitting there, of course she'll be fine. But if you actually were to play with her, a little bit of force, I mean, just me closing my hand, and the whole thing tends to crumble under itself. So that's a bit of a disappointment. In terms of size, Windblade is your typical deluxe class jet. What it lacks in the condensed mass of a standard car transformer, it makes up for with its huge area footprint. Transforming Windblade is a fairly simple process. There's a clever bit of engineering going on with the legs, but everything else is expected. The real key to the transformation, however, is that it's both intuitive, yet doesn't follow a designated step-by-step method. Almost every section can be transformed independently. No need to worry about breakage due to a missed action. Sure, this does mean that mid-transformation you'll more than likely end up with a jumbled mess that may appear daunting, but it's very easy to figure out where every piece goes, and it's not an experience that'll keep you guessing. Altogether, along with a couple rounds of practice, and you'll be going from jet to robot in a matter of seconds rather than minutes. Fully transformed, and it's clear that Windblade's robot mode was heavily inspired by a Japanese geisha or samurai. And it looks fantastic. The petite body along with the sharp, angular wings create a striking image that translates into an agile and fierce warrior. Proportions are very much on the female side, making her stand out amongst most Transformers. Far more glossy red plastic is used to balance out the drab-looking black pieces, with blue metallic highlights adding a nice touch. The head sculpt is, of course, the most impressive part of this robot mode. I'm seriously surprised Hasbro was able to get all these small paint apps done with such clean execution. Although, I will admit more blue and gold additions could have been used to detail the rest of the toy. Now there's a couple issues I do have with the body. First, her backpack. It's huge and just sits there. A reduced cockpit size would have been beneficial here. Thankfully, the large wings tend to hide it from most angles. Also, there's an unfortunate gap that runs through her torso when viewed from the side. Yet, my biggest complaint would have to be the large square panels that sit alongside her stomach. They make the silhouette far more square and blocky than it should be, when clearly the aesthetics as a whole are going for something a bit more thin and curvaceous. Windblade stands at about the 5-inch mark to the top of the head. Nothing too outside the norm for a modern deluxe class Transformer, and despite the issues I've mentioned, she still looks incredible. For articulation, Windblade has a hinge at the base of the neck with a small little locking point right at the front. Why that is, I'm not too sure. Now, the top section is not a ball joint, so there is no tilting, it's just a simple swivel, and side to side is good. The only problem is that high collar will impede some movement, but it's not going to be that bad. And then, of course, because of transformation, you do have a nice free waist swivel. Arms are on a simple ball joint, so there's a good amount of range in every direction. Elbows are on a single hinge with 90 degrees of motion. And then, of course, there's a very tight wrist swivel. The shoulder pads here are independent and they can be moved upwards. However, they don't lock there, so every time you move the arm up and then bring it back down, it collapses with it. It's a bit annoying. These wings have a lot more articulation than I was expecting. First of all, they're not connected to the backs of the arms. They're just an independent little hinge that is placed in between the ball joint and the, I guess, torso connection. So they can go up and down on their own. These pieces can swing back and forth, and then you have the angled ability here, and then there's a second hinge that lets the wings flap inwards, and then I like to display mine with the turbines facing forward, but I guess officially it's supposed to be like that. So it's up to you. There's a good amount of options here. Now the legs are on a simple ball joint as well, so they can go forwards and outwards, but because of the way this section here is sculpted on that little point, if you want her to kick diagonally and forwards, that will impede you. So it's a bit of a weird limitation, but it's a limitation nonetheless. There is a designated thigh swivel, although, again, this point will stop you from moving it too far. Single jointed knee, which has about 90 degrees of range, and there's nothing going on in the ankle. But this is the bigger problem. Windblade has a tough time standing, not because she doesn't have well-designed ankle. I mean, there's enough, even though these are just small spaces of area, there's enough points to keep her stable. The problem is the heel is very loose, and this will collapse just on movement. And if it's not this that collapses inwards, it's the fact that this doesn't lock anywhere, so this will keep moving. And if it's not either of these that are gonna affect you, it's this front piece, because these tabs here, or the single tab, it does not lock securely, or at least it's not as secure as I would have liked. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is, between this, and this piece, this is going to be a very hard toy to stand, because whenever you put it down, something tends to kick out or collapse inwards, or just, I guess, break stability, and that's a bit unfortunate. For the expectations of a Deluxe class Transformer, there isn't much else I could ask for in terms of articulation on Windblade. Extended range in the elbows and knees would have been nice, but it's the poor joint tolerances here that stand out as the main limiting factor. For accessories, Windblade comes with a sword and matching scabbard. Both are well sculpted, and the former has a purple to clear gradient on the blade. I found the color change a bit too harsh and would have preferred something more gradual. The figure can wield both items in each hand with ease, and when not in use, she can attach the scabbard to her hip via the thigh swivel gap, which in of itself is a smart idea. The scabbard can also be stored in her alt mode, pegging in underneath the jet. I don't know if I'd say it fills out the jet proportions more though, it just adds more plastic. Windblade's other accessory is her fan, which is stored on her head. You can pull it off and she can hold it. It's not the most interesting gimmick, however, it's completely thematic with the Japanese inspiration, and that's enough to validate its existence. In the past couple of years, the Transformers Generations toy line has seen multiple sweeping changes in terms of its design philosophy, and Windblade seems like she was built by the culmination of lessons Hasbro's learned in that time. The plastic quality is right on the fine line between feeling sturdy and cheap. Only the most crucial paint apps have been applied, and the simplified transformation won't satisfy engineering junkies. On the other hand, there are positives to be found. There's an increased emphasis on articulation. The speedy transformation makes it easy to go from one mode to another, and together they result in a toy that's actually great to play with. More than anything, Transformers Generation Windblade was a great idea that's been fully realized into an awesome toy. Without any fiction to base her off of, Hasbro were able to make a cool-looking Transformer with unique Japanese theme, and it completely paid off. That said, I would still like to see a version of this toy that's closer to Sarah Stone's interpretation of the character in the IDW comics, but that's a story for another day. Here's the thing, Generations Windblade is not a perfect toy, yet it's been a very, very long time since I've had this much fun with a regular retail release Transformer, and the novelty of this being the first fan-built bot only adds to its charm. But that's all for me. Thanks for watching, and I like this toy so much I'm ready to double dip, because Takara's version of Windblade looks even better.